Assalamualaikum. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Voice of Scholar on Academic TV. Because we have a very special topic today, Russia and Ukraine crisis. Some say that it will be such an Armageddon for the world, the end of the world. And some say it will be the outbreak for the Third World War. But here is the discussion. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia, however, is not something that has just happened. At first, there were three countries, there were three states, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. They were a single territory, with its center now being the Ukrainian capital, that is Kiev. Then the region developed after the ruler of Kiev entered into a trade and mining agreement with Constantinople, and the region was named Kievan Rus in the 10th century. Because of this agreement, Kievan Rus began to apply Orthodox Christian bases and rejected Roman Catholicism brought by the people from Poland. The conflict began after the ruler of Kievan Rus, Yaroslav the Wise, died, and the breakup of the Kievan Rus region in the form of establishment of small governments based on religion, race, and language. This was exacerbated by attack from the Mongol Empire in 1237 to 1240, causing the division of Kievan Rus territory. The split was also used by the kingdom in Lithuania and Poland to spread Roman Catholicism before finally the Russian Empire, which moved its center of power in Moscow, was unable to take back the old territories of Kievan Rus in 1782. Since then, however, there have been differences between Ukrainian living in the East and Ukrainian living in the West. The majority of people in Eastern Ukraine speak Russian and follow Orthodox Christianity, while people in the Western Ukraine speak mostly Ukrainian and adhere to the Catholic religion. The conflict experienced in Ukraine also occurred in 1817 after the Russian Empire collapsed and changed into the Soviet Union. Ukraine, then known as the National Republic of Ukraine, declared war on the new government controlled by Bolshevik with the aim that Ukraine could become an independent state. The war ended in 1921 with a crushing defeat on the Ukrainian side. Furthermore, most of the territory of Ukraine, such as Crimea, Kuban, and other, belong to the Soviet Union, while the western part of Ukraine belonged to Poland. The stark differences and conflict that have occurred between Russia and Ukraine have also changed the identity that were originally shared by both parties. Russia considered its identity as a country based on the principle of ordinary, or in Russia it means one nation, where the territory and nation that were formerly a unitary of Kievan Rus are part of Russia, which is expected to be reunited. Meanwhile, Ukraine considers its identity as an independent country that has its own culture and language and has ties to Europe rather than Russia. Crimea, as one of the main parts of the Ukrainian and Russian conflict, also has its own history. After the invasion of Mongol Empire in 1240, Crimea was ruled by the Mongols. Before 2 centuries later, it was ceded to the Turks as a result of the war between the Mongol Empire and the Ottoman, and Crimea returned to the Russian Empire in 1783. When the Russian Empire collapsed and became the Soviet Union and World War II took place, Crimea was one of the regions experiencing the most violent turmoil due to the stark difference between the Russia population who supported Soviet Union and the population of Mongol who supported Ukraine and Germany at the time. This led to the punishment of the Mongol population being forced to move to Siberia during the reign of Joseph Stalin after Crimea was reconquered by the Soviet Union. During the reign of Nikita Khrushchev, Crimea was handed over to Ukraine in order to strengthen relation between the Ukraine people and the Soviet Union. Crimea became part of Ukraine and it survived even though the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. All right, briefly speaking, the relationship between Ukraine and Russia has been in conflict for a long time, marked by the division of the cultural unity of Kievan Rus and continues until the Ukraine crisis, which is still ongoing today. The main cause of the conflict is also due to differences in national principles and identity of each country, causing the negative relationship between the two countries to never end. This can also explain why Ukraine insists on joining the European Union based on Ukraine's identity as an independent country with historical link to Europe, while Russia wants Ukraine to stay away from the European realm until the Russian military annexes Crimea as one of its actions based on Russia's identity ordinary principle, as we stated earlier. All right, everyone. Based on this long historical background, some big question arises. What does Russia want from Ukraine by constantly involving a large military force when it comes to Russia? Why is Ukraine so special in Russia's international political map? What or why does Russia attempt to invade Ukraine? All right, toward these questions, Russia has always denied those questions. However, at least there is one thing that Russia wants diplomatically, that is to ask for security guarantees from the West, the United States side, and the member of countries of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or in short we say NATO. Security guarantees that has been always asked by Russia. It's very interesting though. Well, let's say that what Russia demands is a guarantee that Ukraine can never become a member of NATO. The US and NATO both rejected it, however, saying that for this matter, Ukraine has the right to determine their own security policy and no country in the world can intervene. So that locks ensue. The US does not want to comply with Russia's request, nor does Russia refuse to withdraw about 100,000 military personnel from the Ukrainian border. Russia insists that it has the right to place its troops anywhere as long as it is within its territory. On the other hand, NATO is also adamant in rejecting Russia's request, saying that Russia cannot dictate which country can or cannot become member of their alliance. Action of rejecting and denial from each country continues, and at the same time tensions over the Ukraine and Russia issue continued to escalate. But strangely, it's really weird that this tension never reached to its culmination. This has given rise to the notion that a Russian invasion of Ukraine may never take place. But on the other hand, based on the historical background we mentioned earlier, tension is believed will continue to be maintained. There is also a notion that the invasion could happen, but not in the near future. In Washington, D.C., the U.S. is adamant too that Russia has the capability to launch an invasion of Ukraine, and it could happen at any time. But some European countries, even in Ukraine itself, the threat of invasion is perceived as something that will not happen in the near future. Even a senior German diplomat in an article in the Wall Street Journal said that President Vladimir Putin was just bluffing, not having the courage to start war on Ukraine, which incidentally gets extensive backup from NATO and the US. At least the fear of the outbreak of the Third World War will not come true. So ladies and gentlemen, calm down, take a seat, have a good life, as the Armageddon is still far away. All right, why would anyone think this was just a bluff? The decades of peace in Western Europe, coupled with the continents dependent on Russian oil and gas, made some countries around there feel that a Russian invasion of Ukraine will never take place. For them, perhaps the chances of a Russian invasion of Ukraine being the same as an alien invasion from a strange planet to Earth. However, what must be understood here is that the assumption by some Europeans that Russia will not invade Ukraine is not because they regard Vladimir Putin as a more friendly figure than US President Joe Biden. On the contrary, they indeed see Vladimir Putin as far more dangerous than Biden and other world figures. War, they argued, was not something Russia wanted. Instead of war, Russia is considered to have deliberately designed the current tension to destabilize the West. For Europe, a threat of invasion or war can be more destructive than actual war. The US and Europeans are not really divided about what Putin really wants. According to them, Putin wants to form a new security architecture in Europe that recognizes Moscow's influence in the area of the former Soviet Union, a grand design that wants to restore the majesty of the former largest community country. Russia is considered not to restore the Soviet Union, but to restore what Putin once called historical Russia. Historical Russia. These Putin's words refer to an era in the past where Russian and Ukrainian were said to be the same society, as we discussed earlier. Because when viewed from various aspects, including culture and language, Russia and Ukraine are indeed neighboring countries that have so many similarities. Perhaps Putin needs to save this historical Russia by desperately trying to keep Russia from joining NATO. If Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, the chances of achieving historical Russia will never be achieved. But how? But how can Putin achieve historical Russia when Russia and Ukraine are both sovereign states? Is it by way of invasion and a complete siege of Ukraine, as Moscow did against Crimea in 2014? All right, the chance of getting there very, very small. Perhaps what Putin wants in the context of historical Russia is for Ukraine to become a country completely under Russian influence, as is now the case in the several ex-Soviet states, including Belarus. Well, everyone, we are still in the position of wait and see toward the development that are not going to reach its culmination point. Happily, however, peace will be with us forever as always. Thank you for watching, and we'll come back with a new topic. Assalamualaikum, the voice of Zup.